Right, evening everybody. I'll make it 7 o'clock, so we will get underway on time. My name's Councillor Ed Davey. I am the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for Lambeth. Just for those who don't know, the committee is made up of elected members, and we're responsible for trying to hold the council executive and officers to account for the services the council provides, but also the local NHS and the local police and community safety partners, which we do in regular meetings, visits and other work. And one of the functions of the committee as well is to provide this kind of function, which is a call-in where a single backbench councillor, or in this case 3, can call in a decision made by a member of the executive, and then we have to, assuming it fulfills certain criteria, we have to look at it within a certain time frame, which is where we're at with this meeting. So you'll have seen the details of the call-in in the papers. There are some there. It's also online, obviously. And I will go through the procedure in a minute, but if we start by getting the other members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting with Danny, please. And by the way, the meeting is being video streamed and also on the council website audio streamed, but if you don't speak into your microphone, it won't pick it up for the audio stream, so please do use your mics, which you do by pressing the green button and then turning off again. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Danny Adelapo, an elected member from Streatham South Ward.
Emily Trepas for Streatham Wells.
Councillor Tim Briggs, I'm a Conservative member for Clapham Common.
I'm Rosina Chowdhury, Councillor for Streatham Hill.
Councillor Andy Wilson, also Vice Chair of Overview and Scrutiny, and from Larkhall Ward, so welcome to Larkhall this evening.
Matt Parr, Councillor from Cold Harbour Ward and Vice Chair of Scrutiny.
Alex Bigham, Councillor for Stockwell Ward.
Good evening, I'm Elaine Carter. I'm Council Officer and I work with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Hello, I'm David Rose from Democratic Services.
And the call-in councillors and their officers and cabinet member will introduce them when we get to that point. So I forgot to ask the members to declare any declarations of interest at this point. Can any members indicate if they've got a declaration of interest in this matter this evening? No, thank you. And to note any apologies, Councillor Dyer is on her way. She had another meeting, so she's going to be a couple of minutes late. She'll probably walk in any minute now. We have
Chair,
anything
can I
else?
just also record the apologies from Theo Dyer, one of the co-opted members.
Thank you. Now it's up to me to outline the call-in process and arrangements for the hearing this evening. So when I stop talking, we will hear from the 3 councillors who have made the call-in this evening for about 5 minutes. You can have a little bit longer if you need it, but we'll try and stick to time if we possibly can. And then earlier today, I had an indication of 6 people who wanted to speak, which I've got a list of here, which I can call people up when the time comes. And you're going to have 2 minutes each. There'll be a little bit of discretion on that, but try and stick to your time and try and stick to the subject of the call-in very specifically. Then I'll ask Councillor Hopkins, who's the executive member who's made the decision that's being called in, to respond to any new material that's come up or anything he wants to say to the substantive call-in that's in the papers. And he's got lots of senior officers who are involved in the work that's being considered, who can answer any kind of technical questions. And then I'll ask members of the committee if they've got questions. I'm sure they will have, either of the councillors who are making the call in, or the officers, or the cabinet member responsible for the decision, because, and that's the most kind of substantial bit of the meeting, in that we have a constitutional role to play to make sure that we consider what's being asked of us carefully. Then we'll ask the councillors who've called in the decision if they consider the reasons for the call-in have been addressed, and if they don't, we'll ask them what they want us to do, and then we'll consider individually what course of action, if any, to take, and depending on the consensus or otherwise, I will sum up what course of action to take, if any. And I will come to what courses of action are available to us if and when that becomes pertinent. One thing I would just say at the outset is that this meeting is very specifically to address the concerns raised by the ward councillors, which is in the papers and that I will refer to. We're not here to discuss the merits or otherwise of the Garden Bridge, whether we think it's a good idea, whether we think it's in the right place, whether we think it's a giant white elephant, complete waste of money, a huge monument, the mayor's vanity or not. None of those things are up for discussion or for consideration. It's just what these councillors have asked us to consider, which is very specific technical matters that are in here. So, having said that, I will ask those three councillors to introduce themselves, and it's up to them how they split their time. And as I say, about 5 minutes, please, councillors. Thank you.
I'm Councillor Jenny Mosley from Bishop's Ward.
Councillor Kevin Craig, Bishop's Ward.
Councillor Ben Kine from Bishop's Ward.
So I'm going to start. I'd just like to say thank you to the Scrutiny Committee for hearing us this evening. As you're aware, and sort of following on from your starter there, Chair, the Garden Bridge is a controversial and highly politicised project. You may also be aware that we are open in our opposition to the Garden Bridge, largely due to our democratic responsibilities to the people who have elected us, but also by our desire to ensure that everything is done in a manner by Lambeth which is appropriate for a project of this size and visibility. However, we would like to emphasise that we are here today to call in the decision to vary the lease between Lambeth and Coin Street Community Builders, because we do not think it is the right time to do this, and that the decision, the supporting report and the heads of term are not ready for transfer to officers to negotiate. There are far too many open questions and liabilities. I would like to highlight one key issue to the Scrutiny Committee, that the decision avoids a very simple question. Is the variation of the lease between Lambeth and Coin Street Community Builders a sound idea? This is normally the basis of any good decision. Regrettably, it simply avoids this critical question. Who benefits? Is it genuinely in the interest of the community and Coin Street where I live? Why do we need this? Whilst planning permission has been granted for the Garden Bridge, we as a corporate body cannot proceed on the basis that the decision to vary the lease, to turn public land into private space, is a sound idea based on future assurances from the council. It needs to go through a robust decision-making process. Please note that the outcome we would like from the call-in for this Scrutiny Committee is to resolve to refer the decision to the relevant Cabinet member for reconsideration with a written explanation setting out the nature of the committee's concerns, as we feel this is in Lambeth's interest. The decision proposes that land on the South Bank that is currently a well-utilised and protected public open space be developed for commercial use. This is an area of prime importance for people and the history of the area. Such an important decision should be subject to detailed legal and democratic scrutiny. Specifically, we are concerned by the manner in which variations to the lease are represented. Firstly, the timing. It's too early to approve this decision and it's driven by the wrong reasons. Why now? We believe it's far too early to present this decision because of several reasons. Firstly, the uncertainties around the guarantor and whether this will be legally binding. Secondly, the heads of terms not being finalised with Coin Street. And thirdly, an unsound report to support the decision. sadly, in our minds, it's very clear why the decision is being presented at this time, and I'd like to quote from page 3 of the draft heads of terms. The Garden Bridge Trust leasee is seeking to enter into a sublease prior to construction to satisfy investors. The reason why this is so important is that the decision to transfer the use of land is to satisfy the needs of investors. As a matter of principle, we would like to ask, who are these investors? Why are they driving this process? We don't know who these investors are. Do they live in Lambeth? It's become evident that they're giving a stake in public land, which in itself is a very, very different proposition from sponsoring a charity with public accountability. Supporters, yes. Donors, yes. Investors, absolutely no. Who decided this? We'd also like to remind you that the Garden Bridge Trust is a charity. Another point is the variation of the lease as presented is still misrepresented. I quote the response to our call-in. The phrase "remain largely unaltered" relates to the terms of the lease as applicable to the rest of the area, which is demised under the 1992 lease to Coin Street. The area extends along the river path towards Burnley Spain Gardens and the Oxo Tower. The variation of the lease is unique to the South Landing station plot and construction of the Garden Bridge itself. No other land within the Coin Street lease will be affected by the variation. This totally avoids and misrepresents our key challenge to the variation. We are only concerned about the land in question and not other land. The terms of the lease for the land in question, the South Landing Station, will be varied on considerable terms in respects of rent, alienation and development. This is unarguable, and the officer's report is furthermore misleading even after initial scrutiny. The very character, nature and use of the other land let to Coin Street community buildings would also be fundamentally altered through the intensification of use, which will be a result from the development of such a large commercial building and attraction on what is currently open space. Consequently, this report is still not fit for purpose in its current state. We have reviewed the report by officers to our call-in and are not satisfied, predominantly because the responses drown some simple democratic questions into references to deferrals and procedural jargon, many of which are not sound and could lead Lambeth open to legal challenge. We do not want this. We want to protect the interests and the reputation of Lambeth Council and the interests of our area.
I'll cut what I'm going to say, Chair. I know we're tight on time to give it to Councillor Kind. I wish to add to what Councillor Mosley said, that in terms of scrutiny, it's about how the council takes decisions. And one of my greatest fears and regrets about this whole situation is the lack of response by the Cabinet member to requests to meet regarding a decision that has generations of implications for us and the people that stuck us on Lambeth Council. A request to meet sent by email, a follow-up request chasing that, and our worry is that the responses that we got to that as elected members, which were no willingness to engage, puts this council at risk and its Cabinet members of coming across as arrogant and contemptuous, which we know wouldn't be Councillor Hopkins' desire. So I'd like to put that in, that how else can we as members exercise the voices of those who put us there when the basics don't happen?
And I'll be really quick as well, given we've almost certainly run over the time that we were given, Chair. Basically, just wanted to highlight that the report relies heavily on referring things back to the discussions at Planning Committee, when members of Planning Committee were not making a policy decision about the disposal of the land. They were making a planning decision based on the merits of the application, and that therefore, to rely back on that evidence given a committee without the scrutiny that it deserves, given the level of public interest in this case now, would perhaps be a remiss to the process. But also wanted to draw attention to the committee the considerable weight in the document that goes towards the favourable decision given to the income sharing mechanism that's within the heads of terms, and that the position of Coin Street is that they don't think that Lambeth will be making any money from it. So it's difficult for us as ward councillors to appreciate exactly what the interest of the residents of Lambeth is being put out in this process, given that Coin Street themselves may be making a financial interest and the Garden Bridge Trust will be making an interest, but the Borough of Lambeth will not.
Thank you very much. That's a very useful background. I'm now going to call some of the speakers. I've got 6. Given that there's 3 seats there, I'll probably call them in 2 batches of 3. That probably makes the most sense. So here I've got James Boyson, Hannah Quigley, and Jeremy Cross.
Yeah, do you mind if we swap rounds? Actually? Is that
Whatever,
okay? Yeah.
as long as you
Thank you. Excellent.
clarify who's to. Before you start, what I would say is, I'm sure you've read the papers, and whilst it's really useful to get the background that's just been outlined by the 3 councillors who are making the call in and the stuff that's in the papers, what they've formally asked us to look at is, number 1, that the heads of terms are formally agreed by Coin Street Community Builders. Number 2, it is formally confirmed that the Greater London Authority will act as guarantor for the Garden Bridge. Section 106 and associated Garden Bridge maintenance obligation is in place and legally binding. And number 3, a revised report to support the decision be resubmitted, which addresses or remediates the significant number of misrepresentations and errors in the current report published on the 24th of March, and that this should be resubmitted to support the decision. So that's what we as a committee have to base what we decide on. So what would be really useful to hear from you, if at all possible, if you can address some of those things, because as I say, we're not the planning committee, we're not here to make a policy decision about whether the Garden Bridge is a good idea in principle. We're here to look at those 3 specific things that we've been asked to look at. So if you'd just like to introduce yourself and try and manage 2 minutes each, I'll give you a sort of 30-second warning at the end. That's all right.
My name is King Chung. I'm part of Thames Central Open Spaces. We are a group that formed locally to start off with because we were just annoyed at it being landed on our place as a fait accompli, and so we just asked around, and actually so many people just said, what is going on? We're not happy with this, we haven't been asked or consulted about this. And so we've worked together on these representations so to cover a range of points on the following points. Well, this is a loss of valuable open green space, which was created by the community for the community out of public funding. For local residents who already have little access to open space, I mean, I personally don't have a garden and I value it greatly. The transformation of this site from open space to a permanent income stream for the council is inappropriate and contrary to the explicit purpose of the green space which was created, and it's brazenly immoral. The decision to vary the existing lease rather than attempt a disposal is a crude device to bypass the protection of the site in its status as an asset of community value. The attempt to take this important decision by a single councillor in private rather than by cabinet in public, as long promised to us, shows despicable contempt for openness, transparency and democracy, particularly when it has finally been revealed that Lambeth intend to profit from this action. But it is also contrary to your constitution in a number of ways, and it wouldn't be legal.
Marvellous timing, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Jeremy Cross. I'm a chartered surveyor. I actually live in Waterloo as well, and part of the Thames Central Open Space. I've lived in Waterloo for 22 years and I'm familiar with the site and the history of it. I mention that really specifically because obviously we're talking about leases and it's an area which I've worked in professionally. I want to just reiterate some of the points that King has made and to go back to the point about why do local authorities own open space, and clearly it's in order to afford the highest level of protection to assets that are vital to a community and that are often vulnerable to exploitation. And that's why there's legislation in place to protect the process by which open space is the change of use and disposal. And why does Lambeth own this particular open space? It has a very long history, as people will know. It was secured by the community and recognises the need for public open space in an area which was very short of that. And since then, those pressures have only increased. And in recognition of that, this is exactly the reason why this open space was actually recognised and designated as an asset of community value. And it's that point that we really wanted to stress. By varying the lease rather than disposal, the council are seeking to avoid triggering the protection of the site as an asset of community value, and that's very clear from the way that the report is presented. The repeated arguments presented in the report are that the garden bridge will bring significant benefits to the area, although that's obviously disputable. It does not acknowledge the proper context of the site, the way in which it was created by the local community with funding from the GLC, in order to provide valuable green space for hundreds of new residents in the area. It doesn't, in the report, set out the conditions of the lease which seek to protect the open space and why they're there in the first place. The report finally reveals Lambeth intends to make an ongoing windfall profit from the commercial development of the site.
You've had 2 minutes.
Have
I'm
I?
going to give you Y's extra bit.
Okay, thank you very much. And I won't then repeat, because you've seen it, exactly the section in the report that gushes about the windfall opportunity which is being realised by the council. And we feel this is a real indictment of the approach that the report is recommending that the council takes, bypassing the issues you should be focusing on as custodians of this public open space, and inappropriately stressing the capacity of the council to treat the open space as a cash cow.
Hi, my name is Hannah Quigley and I live on Peabody Housing Estate on Stamford Street. I also do not have a garden. And I was also one of the first residents who grew up on Mulberry Housing Co-op. So I'm one of the 42% who live in social housing in Bishop's Ward. All of the most immediate residents to the land that will be affected by the variation in this lease is social, and the importance of this space and all spaces was acknowledged in the Waterloo SPD. Bishop's Ward has the highest proportion of flats. Bishop's Ward also has the highest crime rate, as stated in the Lambeth document in relation to 2012-2013, especially violence against person and theft and handling. This may be connected to large numbers at Waterloo Station and the South Bank, again from Lambeth documents. Those in flats and in social housing with no gardens, of which there are many in Bishop's Ward, need the open space of the South Bank and the river, which is the largest continuous open space in the north of the borough. This open space allows not only local residents, but those from across Lambeth and visitors and workers to breathe and space to rejuvenate. The decision to change the lease, which was originally put in place to provide this land and to protect it for all by one councillor whose responsibility at the time was just jobs and growth, does not allow a voice by other councillors for these other related concerns. At our deputation, he responded that he would meet with us. He ran out of the chamber and gave us his card. I tried to both phone and email to arrange this, but a meeting never materialised on this matter. I urge you to bring this to full council because of the concerns around miscommunication and promises that were made and trust in relation to that. It's a moral concern that we have as residents.
Thank you very much. If I can ask you to swap your seats for James Boyson, Michael Ball and Will Jennings, please. So if you could introduce yourself and try and stick to 2 minutes, I'll give you a 30-second warning.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Michael Ball. I'm from Waterloo Community Development Group, also involved in Jubilee Gardens Trust, been involved with Lambeth on a lot of regeneration projects being hired by Lambeth to a consultation on SIL. I'll get straight to the point and take, for example, paragraph 2.2 of the second dispatch. There were complaints about errors, misrepresentations and uncertainties in the initial report to Councillor Hopkins. The officer simply doesn't cover that point of the errors. The initial errors have not been addressed. The response itself has errors. I'll go through them. This is a very un-error-free process. I'll give you one very clear example. At 2.3, it states that Jack is responsible for strategic transport planning. He's not. In fact, the decision covers 3 portfolios. The leader is responsible for growth and regeneration of the Waterloo Opportunity Area and represents Lambeth on the Waterloo Project Board. The deputy leader, Paul McGlone, is responsible for maximising income across the borough's assets and is chair of the Asset Management Cabinet Panel, not Jack. Councillor Jennifer Braithwaite, Cabinet Member for Environment and Transport, is responsible for strategic transport planning and transport infrastructure, not Jack. You cannot send this back to Jack. It either has to go to Lib or Cabinet or full Council. It should be full Council because of fundamental issues of legitimacy, of transparency. One of the points made in the report, 2.2, there's no constitutional requirement to consult on decisions relating to variations of leases. Come on, it's good practice. This is much more than a normal variation of lease, and that term implies. This is a complete eradication of an open string. And other reasons you should take it back to full Council. Previous promises from Lib in response to our delegations to full Council.
30 seconds, please.
Okay. It is contrary to the policy, budget and policy framework. The transport implementation plan, there's not a mention of a garden bridge, there's not a mention of a need for a footbridge, there's nothing about that in there. Another error, the report frequently refers to the planning permission issues, which of course have nothing to do with the issue of land. The planning permission process itself was flawed, which is why I took an action, went to the High Court, and we got the guarantee. The guarantee has not been resolved. You may well find the guarantee problem hangs over you. And you may well find the Mayor coming back with that issue where he's expected to pony up for the maintenance costs of the bridge. If you are going to get a windfall from this, Lambeth going to get a windfall, he may say, well, I'll leave that windfall out of this guarantee, and the council could be financially vulnerable as a result. You need to consider these things very carefully. It's inappropriate to be taking this decision in this way, in this context. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Will Jennings. My name is Will Jennings. I'm a resident of Lambeth, and I've also been running a project called the Folly for London for a year, which has worked with TCS, who've been working much longer, and trying to find out some truths about the Garden Bridge. Last week, I saw on Twitter that Jack Hopkins spoke at a social value seminar. I don't know the whole content, but I know he kept using the word collaboration. I want to say that most of us here on this panel and in the audience probably know as much or more than the councillors in here about the history of the Garden Bridge. And as all constituents should be, especially those that know things, we should be considered collaborators and not opponents. You are, after all, our employers, our employees, and we would like to collaborate with our employers to make a better, healthier, greener and more successful borough. We like Lambeth, we like its parks and services, we like its libraries, its historic views over the river. And its history, we chose to live here. You're elected by us to collaborate with us to make it more successful. As such, every action carried out for us and paid for us should be open and transparent. But everything with this so-called Garden Bridge has been shrouded in mystery, and if it wasn't for us here, some journalists and some experts who have given their time and knowledge, we wouldn't know 90% of what we know now. You have the opportunity to try and de-shroud some of that, and instead you're going back into that closet, you're going back into the hiding place. Whether it's TfL, Thomas Heatherwick, the Mayor's Office, Lambeth Council or the Garden Bridge Trust, there are constant gaps here. We've had to work out what fills them. Take the public money spent. This week Sadiq Khan said it's all been spent. It's rubbish. They haven't even got all the money spent. So either he's misinformed or he's lying, because we've all offered to speak to him and he's ignored us. We're offering to speak to you as well. We're offering to collaborate with you. We know that 80,000 of that money went to Lambeth Council privileged planning access. But what happened, and what is the relationship between Lambeth Council, both planning and otherwise, with the Garden Bridge Trust and the developers? I hope you saw in today's newspapers, in the Architects Journal and the Guardian, which I've got here if you haven't, there's a lot of new information come out about the procurement history and what happened before the procurement history, including a meeting with Lib Peck on the 15th of January, 2013, when she met with Thomas Heatherwick and John Lumley. And then, I think a week later, Sue Foster met with Johnson as well. And it wasn't until a month later that the competition, which wasn't a design competition, was launched. I'm going to try and wrap up quickly. The lack of apparent understanding what the public are in relation to the council is present here in the physicality too. I wrote in the letter, which you all received, I think, so I'm sure you've read it. There's no point in me repeating it because you've all read it. But there are bits in it which weren't addressed in response by Jack Hopkins, to do with utility. This word underutilised, which Garden Bridge Trust like to use. Public space is not to utilise in the way of financial windfall like you're talking about. Its utility is subtle and nuanced, and it's not measured in terms of finance or anything like that. It's measured in how much people love it, how much they use it, how much it's subtly used in their peripheral vision. Because if you put a shopping centre or a commercial unit, even if you pretend it's got public use, on public land, it is not a replacement for a public open space. It's for consumers. Citizens are not consumers. Private developments are not replacements for public open spaces. Decisions made in councils by a single member are not replacements for transparent, open democracy. Labour Council should be collaborating with us, your employers, not secluding yourself behind freedom of information, in hidden rooms to make secret decisions, and behind legal get-outs and tweaks to process. I call for all of this to be carried out again in front of a full council in public forum, where your employers, us, have the opportunity to see how you come to your decisions. And I'm sure that other Lambeth residents who are interested in libraries, other parks, in council estates, skate parks, arches and bricks and all sorts of things would like to see how this transparent democracy really could work. Shall I kick off? So last but not least, so I will try and make it short. In conclusion, all the speakers
here... Could you just introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, that would help. So it's James Boyson here. I'm a resident of Lambeth and I work in financial services. In conclusion, all the speakers here today have presented very robust and sound arguments as to why the decision is not fit for purpose at this time. I'm going to take it back a bit to some of the aspects of the decision specifically. Firstly, to reiterate the points that Michael made, and to quote the Council's current constitution in respect of where Cabinet decisions, and I quote, affect more than one Cabinet member portfolio, the leader will take the decision, unless she refers it to the whole Cabinet. We are unsure that that is the best route forward for Jack to be taking this decision by himself. And the history of the Garden Bridge has been regrettably one where processes and governance have been neglected in the interests of those who've been driving this through. We do not want this for Lambeth. We want to protect Lambeth in their interests in this case. The other aspect I would like to cover off is the inappropriate delegation to officers, which is part of the decision. The decision authorises the head of asset strategy, in consultation with the strategic director of corporate resources and the strategic director of neighbourhoods and growth, to conclude the negotiation for the deed of variation. It would appear that this is structured to avoid further scrutiny. We do not accept the argument that is stated in the response to our call-in that the decision is necessary, I quote, to authorise officers to conduct negotiations in view of the level of public interest and debate concerning the proposed development. This is wholly wrong. The officers have already been negotiating the heads of terms, and there is no requirement for this decision to be in place to do so. Otherwise, how would they be able to do this in the first place? Moreover, delegation to officers has the alternate effect. It exposes them to significant, undesirable and unacceptable risks, while simultaneously jeopardising the Council's broader reputation for accountable and transparent decision-making. This has already been a key weakness of the Garden Bridge project to date. To round up, there is a danger with the way the decision is presented, is that it becomes a foregone conclusion, and that the officers and other parties coin Street, and most importantly, everyone else in this room are rendered exposed by Lambeth in his roles as a broker of the land variation, and that they're driven by presumption that they will accept a decision which is not fully formed or in their interests. Thank you very much. That's all.
Okay, so that's everyone on my list who indicated they wanted to speak. We always try and hear from as many people who want to speak, so I'm glad we were able to do that. So I'm now going to ask Councillor Hopkins to respond to the call-in itself and the things we've subsequently heard from the councillors who've made the call-in and the 6 members of the public, the residents who have just spoken. Councillor Hopkins.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. Thank you for those speakers. In terms of what this call-in is about, you made reference on page 10 to the request for deferral of this decision. One being on the heads of terms formally agreed by the Coin Street Community Builders, CSCB. That is the purpose of the decision that was made, to vary the lease, to go into negotiations and to agree that. I think there have been a number of queries of opaqueness. I think the lease negotiation, the variation, is very, very clearly spelt out. It was put out in the public sphere. Numbers of comments came forward. I can't see why that's still a live concern. That's part of the process. The second, around the guarantor for the Garden Bridge, is part of the planning process. That's in the planning, the legal agreement, the section 106, and as you will see in the lease negotiation, part of the lease arrangements. Michael very eloquently put that his judicial review forced the mayor to make that commitment, which was made. As far as I'm concerned, in terms of me making this decision, there are two legal protections for Lambeth Council on that. One is through the planning process, which is not what's in question today. The second is whether it's in the lease negotiations, which is in your pack. The third, responding to the misrepresentations, and one was focused on from Councillor Mosley, so I'll refer to that, around that the terms remain largely unaltered around the space. The majority of the lease that exists with Coin Street and that will be renegotiated will remain exactly the same. Bernie Spain Gardens will remain, there will be green space. The actual area in question is small in relative to the larger space. I know that people don't like that, and any lost public spaces for some people unhappy, but from my perspective, in terms of making this decision, that seems to me to be not a misrepresentation and therefore not valid as a concern. In terms of the decision as set out in the Constitution, this is clearly a variation of a lease and therefore a single member decision. I have been following this through from day one in my role as cabinet member covering planning, regeneration. Am I convinced that we follow the correct process? Yes, I am. I stand by that decision. This is not about whether we like the Garden Bridge, whether it's in the right place. We are responding to the mayor, the GLA, and I think, and I'm convinced that officers and the council have responded in exactly the right way in accordance with the Constitution. I'm happy to take other questions. I hope that the other issues that were raised, some of which are not relevant to this decision, but are clearly relevant in contextual terms, i.e. they were part of the planning process, were fully responded to in the paper, but I'm happy to respond to any of those other questions as our officers.
Wow, everyone's been very concise this evening. I'm sure it's got nothing to do with the fact there's an Arsenal game on, and we will take as long as we need, regardless of that. So perhaps now I can take questions from members of the committee. I'll start with Councillor Adam Lepore. Thank you.
Thank you. As we've heard a couple of times, one of the points we're being asked to consider is this concern about the guarantor not currently being in place. Without wanting to get into the politics or planning aspects of that, just like a bit of further guidance from Councillor Hopkins or the officers, if there is any legal or financial risk that Lambeth could be held responsible for any ongoing costs in the future as a result of this issue. Thanks.
I'm going to defer to Greg Harlan.
Greg Carson, head lawyer, principal lawyer, property planning and housing. The negotiations are in place, and until planning is satisfied, and it is a planning matter, they will not get planning permission for the bridge. Likewise, as far as the heads of terms are concerned in the lease, we are dealing with that as well by negotiation. So we don't see that the council will be put at any risk at all.
That second point you made, does that refer to point one of what we've been asked to call in terms of the heads of terms being agreed by Coin Street Community Buildings? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
So just to be completely clear on this, so I just want to get it completely clear in mind. So if the guarantor is not put in place, then the planning criteria won't have been met and the bridge won't happen. So it's not even a question we have to face in the future.
That's correct.
Councillor Park.
Thank you, Chair. Developing that slightly, we're talking about a deed of variation, the centre of it all, isn't it? What I wanted to clarify is when we have a finalised, I guess, ready to sign deed of variation, is that going to be enacted as a cabinet member decision, which would be subject to scrutiny and calling? And then, would the full deed of variation be published? And secondly, really the same question for the guarantee. Will the details of the guarantee be published, and will it be will the acceptance of the guarantee in some way be subject to scrutiny and calling as a decision with a capital D?
I'm going to answer the first part of that and say yes, it'll come back. I mean, the deed of variation that we've gone out with is the deed of variation we're expecting. That's what our position is to go out with, so I don't expect there to be further changes, and within the paper you'll see that any material changes would come back. It would be a cabinet member decision, it'd come back to me, that would go back on the list in exactly the same way as the deed of variation, allowing officers to go and negotiate in exactly the same way, so therefore would go out to the public and for the 2-week period as this was. I think that's right.
As far as the deed of variation is concerned, it'll be a public document because it'll be on the land registry, so it will be published. As far as the guarantees being published, that'll be part of the cabinet member decision, so that'll be part of the report. So that'll be published.
Okay. So just to be absolutely
microphone, please.
Hold on, one second.
So, just to clarify,
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Sorry, I'm Sue Foster, Strategic Director, Neighbourhoods and Growth. Just in terms of the guarantee, which is obviously part of the planning process, that will also be published and available, and the planning permission won't be granted unless that is satisfactory.
Councillor Parr?
So just to be really, really clear, okay. What we have at the moment is heads of terms. So eventually we will have a full deed of variation. So that will be published, available for people to see at the time that a new cabinet member decision is presented, and that will be subject to scrutiny.
Sorry, if just to take you through that again.
Okay.
A decision has been made, and that is the recommendations set out in the report, which sets out the ability and the responsibility to authorise from Councillor Hopkins to officers to finalise the negotiations on the heads of terms. If the heads of terms, as are negotiated, are as set out in the report and attached, and the details are negotiated like that, then this will not be referred back for a further decision. This will then be entered into as a variation of the lease, and it will go into the land registry and will become a public document. If, however, during those negotiations that officers undertake, there is a material change, so something significantly different materialises whilst those negotiations take place, then, and only then, it will come back in exactly the same way and for a new decision to be made in the same way that we have taken this decision here.
I think Chair, I finally got to the answer of that then. So then we'd like perhaps to check the process for the guarantee in the same way. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, that we've been presented with any outline of the nature of the guarantee in the same way that we were given a heads of terms, it gives an outline of the deed of variation. So, how is that guarantee subject to scrutiny and possibility of calling? What is the process?
Sandra Roebuck, Assistant Director for Investment and Growth. The guarantee is part of the planning process, so that's the place where it will be published. I'm not aware of any public consultation around the content of the guarantee. That process isn't happening, but the actual final guarantee will be published, and I think the GLA intend to conclude that process in the next couple of weeks in terms of signing the guarantee. Michael and others will recall that the purpose of the guarantee is to ensure that if the Garden Bridge Trust for some reason defaults on its ability to maintain the Garden Bridge, then the GLA will step in to take on that responsibility, so that the responsibility of maintenance does not fall in any shape or way to the council. In addition to the guarantee, colleagues in the planning department have also negotiated a contribution to management and maintenance for the bridge of £250,000, the purpose of which is to ensure the local area is well managed and maintained. That income will come to the council as the accountable body, which is the usual way. We will then set down an agreement around what that money should be spent on, based on an evidenced approach around what the exact issues are once the bridge is constructed. All of that is wrapped into an operational management agreement, which is also part of the Planning Commission and Section 106. Once the bridge is open, if it goes ahead, the local area will be monitored in terms of any impact that wasn't foreseen as part of the planning process, and the expectation and the requirement of the legal agreement is the Garden Bridge Trust will come to agreement with the council about what mitigation is required as a result of that, whether that is litter picking, antisocial behaviour, whatever it relates to. We will have the evidence to demonstrate what the impact of that has been. Councillors will recall that in relation to London Eye agreement, for example, we have a legal agreement there where visitors to London Eye contribute to management and maintenance of the Waterloo area, and that operates in a not dissimilar way in terms of measuring the impact and the mitigation that's required in response to additional visitors to the area and the consequences of that.
Thank you. Anything else?
I have a question on the different tax, so you take the one.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just following up, really just in reaction to partly part one about the heads of terms being formally agreed by Coventry builders before taking the decision, and secondly to what we've heard from the members of the audience here today about the opaqueness of the process. I think partly the concern is around material changes from what is exactly here in front of us, and what constitutes material change, whether that's going to happen behind closed doors, we're not going to know about it. I don't really get from what's been written in the report where that will then come back for further scrutiny, and I think that the word material is slightly ambiguous, and I say that as someone who doesn't really understand the process as well as one of the officers do, so assurances on that and that process would be very much welcome.
A material change is something which is of its nature not small or de minimis. The heads of terms sets out the principles by which the council wishes to negotiate. Any departure from that would be a material change. So any movement away from the heads of terms as set out in, would be a material change.
So forgive me for trying to simplify this so I can understand it, but let's take an example that was raised earlier around the concerns around what was listed on page 3 about sublease prior to construction to satisfy investors. Say, for example, the word investors was changed to donors. Is that a material change, or is that something that we would never see again? I ask not to be, pedantic, but more to get an understanding of where our role here in terms of scrutiny would function, because I wouldn't want to see material change and not have an opportunity to see it again.
Investors, I would not consider will an investor to be different to a donor? I mean, the person who's putting the money in is contributing to the funding. That is the matter between them and Garden Bridge Trust.
So just a point of order, Chair. Our legal representative says that's a matter for the Garden Bridge Trust, but it's actually used as a rationale in the heads of terms as a trigger with regards to the timing of why this has come forward right now at this time and why this unprecedented decision has been taken in this manner. So I'd actually, just as a point of order, ask, how is that not relevant?
I think perhaps there's some, I don't know, misunderstanding between the word investor and donor, and I suppose the outcome is what do you get for your money? So my understanding is that there are a number of individuals or corporate entities who are donating money to the Garden Bridge Trust to allow this to happen. Whether they count as investors and expect a return versus charitable donors is a semantic point.
No, it's not. Of course it's not.
Let me finish. The heads of terms and the planning agreement that was made was about the number of days in which the bridge might be closed for commercial activities, which was limited by the planning committee, and therefore, you know, those are the sorts of considerations that I think may be exercising concern about the word investor as someone who's going to try and profit from this in some way. But in terms of whether that varies in terms of the head lease, I don't see that. We've been very clear about what we expect from this. The Planning Applications Committee and their conditions have been very clear what they expect, and I don't see that. I mean, I think in answer to Councillor Wilson's point, for example, if more space were asked for than was agreed, that would be a material consideration. That would be a change that would be significantly inappropriate. If the profit share that came back from the buildings and the businesses that were based in the island, the landing site that we've put into the heads of terms in order to then feed back into the local community were changed, that would be a material consideration. I mean, they're significant changes. But lots of these have been put into the lease conditions, around, numbers of millimetres of extra space taken. That's your limit. Anything further than that, from my perspective, as the cabinet member making the decision, would be a material consideration.
Councillor Mosley wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, I just want a point of information with regards to the word donor and the word investor. I work for a major charity, so I work with donors every day of the week. They're people that give money freely as gifting clients. An investor, and I've looked this up just to clarify, allocates capital with the expectations of a future financial return. They are very different things. That word, that's within their whole word, and I think that needs to be considered.
Okay. I had Councillor Briggs, I think, next, and then I'll come back.
So I'm hear me? Yeah.
No.
So I'm grateful to Councillor Hopkins for giving examples of what will constitute material change, because I wasn't clear what that was, and I'm grateful for that, sort of setting it in a practical context. I've just got a question really on one of the responses to one of the questions. The 2.5 on page 4, this is the second batch. This may just be me, but I don't really understand it. So, heads of terms set out the council's desired outcome from the proposed variation of the existing lease and are subject to negotiation. Everyone, where I am. So this is the response to the bold paragraph 2.5. And then it says, the decision is necessary to authorise officers and to conduct the negotiations in view of the level of public interest and debate concerning the proposed development. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it saying that officers have to make this decision in secret because of the level of public interest? Is that what it's saying?
No, I think think no, don't worry, Councillor Briggs. I think you've genuinely misunderstood. The point of me making this decision to authorise officers to conclude negotiations is so that the heads of terms can be out in the public sphere, exactly for this purpose.
Okay. What? Can we have that in English?
The decision is necessary to authorise officers to conduct. The decision. What's that decision? What's that referring to?
Okay, let me I'll explain. The decision that you're being asked that's been called in is the decision to allow officers on this lease negotiation, right, to conclude it. It's very, very clearly spelt out to conclude those negotiations with Queen Street community builders, not behind closed doors, out in the public, visible, online. If I hadn't made that decision to allow them to do that, then negotiations behind closed doors would have continued. This was about transparency.
Ah, that's such a fact.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Bingham.
Ask a more sort of fundamental question. There seems to be some dispute about the nature of the space that's impacted for this. My understanding, not being a local resident, but knowing the area a bit, is that Burnley Spain Gardens is not affected by this. Great clarity on this. And during the representations, made the point that the current land is open space. I just wanted to get a sense of what kind of scale are we talking about in terms of square feet roughly, and what's the current use of the site.
The area of the current lease interest is greater than the area that is being sought to be varied. So Burnley Spain Gardens is part of that wider area, but actually the very specific changes that are being anticipated relate to a part of that wider lease area. And the area is...
No, it's not 410. You can find the full commercial.
We'll come back to you on that.
Okay. Useful to know. Appreciate you might not have figures to hand, but the sense of what the land is currently used for.
The current land is, as people have indicated, open space.
That means, for Councillor Briggs and others, practical perspective, it's a concrete walkway along the river that runs down essentially opposite ITV London studios. So you might walk around there, you'd see performance.
It's grass.
Quite finished. If you just let me finish. The Queen Street community builders often have buildings there, temporary, in order to raise money, and there is some grass space which sits at the back. There are also a number of trees. Lots of these issues were picked up through the planning process.
Please.
More broadly, why, given the public interest in this, did you not think to perhaps take this to Cabinet for greater scrutiny discussion? It's been indicated, meet with local councillors and campaigners.
The council has always, in principle, supported the Garden Bridge. There's been numerous letters, written letters and engagements by the leader of the council on this. This is not new. The planning process was one of the most rigorous that I've ever seen within the council. It produced 46 planning conditions, which is unprecedented in Lambeth. Many of those were not delegated back to officers, but were made to come back to committee, and that's returned back to committee a number of times, which again, in my time on the council, is unprecedented. Through that process, a lot of the concerns that have been raised tonight that are actually planning matters, rather than as a matter, the decision-making process that we're here to look at tonight, were satisfactorily in process terms, and I recognise that the outcome is not always what people want. But satisfied in the planning process. In this instance, I've engaged with all three councillors over a number of months and
potentially years, I've known that Councillor Kind has been against the Garden Bridge from day one, and he's always made his voices clear. He's always made his voice clear. The matter that Councillor Craig was referring to was an unfortunate instance of an email that I was unwell and unable to respond to. The second email that came from Councillor Craig followed a press story, not corroborated by me, but included emails to me which very, very clearly expressed what their concerns were as local councillors, and there was didn't feel like there was an intention to meet. But I feel comfortable as a cabinet member making this decision that I've understood the three councillors' perspectives, not just at this point, but actually throughout the process. I also received a number of representations, both some in favour, some against, for various different reasons, some highlighting specific aspects, some not, when this decision was published online. And of course, in making this decision, I trawled through the representations that were made at the Planning Applications Committee and then subsequent committees. So I feel, in that sense, as a cabinet member, that I've listened, I've understood, and I've heard what the concerns were, both from local councillors, the MP, and members of the community.
No, how many people emailed you about this?
Yeah, I think it's surprising me to hear that the council is formally in favour of the Garden Bridge. I'm sorry, the leader has said that it's never been a formal vote of full council, a formal decision of the Labour group. I appreciate there's been extensive scrutiny through the planning process, and we're not trying to replicate that. But I think the concern here is about the policy-making process rather than the role of the council in relation to its planning powers. I think I'm still not entirely satisfied that there was sufficient scrutiny, I think, given the controversy around this. I just wanted to ask one final question, though, which was, why was the decision made to look at a variance of the lease rather than a disposal?
Please, can you repeat that? We can't hear at the back.
Sorry, my question was, why was there a decision made to vary the lease, pursue that route, rather than disposal of the land?
The difference between the two is technical and depends on the
it's not.
The change that is being made. Having considered the difference between the existing lease and what was being proposed, it was considered that a variation of what existed was all that was necessary and appropriate, and therefore that is what has come forward. So it involves no change in the time of the lease, in terms of the timescale of the lease. It involves the ability for a building to be built, the South Landing building to be built on the land, and it also enables the subletting arrangements that are set out in the lease. So that constitutes a variation of the existing lease. It doesn't constitute a disposal, and therefore that is the new heads of terms that have been set out and that are in front of you. That also sets out the mechanism within the Constitution that the Council needs to go through to ensure that the proper decision-making process has taken place. And the mechanism that has been carried out for this variation is in line with the Constitution and has gone through the proper process. In fact, in most cases, as Councillor Hopkins has indicated, for lease variations, we wouldn't publish them in this way. As a local authority, we are dealing with a large number of lease variations, and most of those would not be published as heads of terms in this form, but actually once they're concluded would become a public document on the land registry. So because of the significance of this, it was considered appropriate to publish it. But there is nothing in the changes that are being made that constitute a disposal rather than a variation of the police.
But it circumvents the ACV protection. That's
Yes.
the reason for doing it.
I mean, that was the point I was going to come to, was that it was alleged that by not disposing of the land you avoid the protection in terms of open spaces. Is that correct or not?
It's not correct. The council has satisfied itself that both Croydon Street Community Builders and also the Garden Bridge Trust are community interest groups. It is a statutorily defined matter. It's set out in the Asset Community Value England Regulations of 2012. Regulation 13 states that where there's a relevant disposal to a community interest group, the moratorium period is not
disposal.
You still have to go through the process, though.
They have to give you notice of the relevant disposal, but if it's to a community interest group, the disposal will carry on.
And we have legal advice as well.
Councillor Dyer.
Just found it a
Sorry. My question was actually around this kind of clarity between variation and the disposal. I suppose, for me, when looking at what the scrutiny committee was asked to look at, those three key questions, it's about the clarity about the heads of terms and why that route has been sort of like taken in terms of the variation as opposed to a disposal and that kind of like route. And you've sort of outlined that to some extent, I have to say, that you've done that. But then there's a concern for me about why is it that the community are sort of really concerned about the process that's been conducted in relation to this decision, but yet there's an element of transparency that you've taken in relation to this that is not traditionally taken, but you've sort of taken into consideration the public interest then. However, in terms of what's informed the decision-making process, in terms of the report, aspect 3, I don't know whether or not we're aspect point 3 under what do you want, what page is that? What do you want?
Page 10 is the major
yeah?
factor.
So the concerns that have been raised in the calling, yeah, about the significant number of misrepresentations and errors in the current report. The report is meant to support the decision, right? The report is meant to support the decision, yeah? The decision around variation of beliefs.
And amongst other things, I think the four areas that have been highlighted in the calling, so that relate to point 3, i.e. the misrepresentations and errors, are listed on page 8 and 9 as in tabs 1, 2, 3 and 4, and have been responded to in the report by point 210, I think, to 214. As well as some of what I've said this evening. So 210 responds to the significance of changes of the lease. That point around how much land is actually being taken, is it significant? The question was that the area remains largely unaltered, and this is a point of how big is that? The second, about the role of the Planning Applications Committee that was raised in the calling, is essentially around, is there a kind of Chinese wall between the council planning department processes and the decision-making processes here? And I think councillor colleagues around the room will appreciate that the planning process has been separate. It's been separate. It's a huge range of both scrutiny, due process. I've taken that on board in my decision in terms of, has the planning process been right? Has it followed the right processes? Not what outcome it got to. Was it done correctly? Which I think for me satisfies myself of that role of the Planning Applications Committee. 3 and 4, consultation and objections, I've sort of responded to. Of yes, I've read them, I've understood them, I've listened, I've understood the process. I went back to the Planning Applications Committee consultation responses, statutory consultation, the representations that were made at that point, and therefore feel confident that whilst the decision that's being made, or that I've made, that's been called in, might not be what people want, might not get to the outcome, it's not that I've ignored them or written them off in any way. I take it very seriously, and I think it's healthy in a democracy that people get that opportunity to raise those concerns, and I've certainly responded.
So you can override them?
A number of them were sent through to me that didn't come through to the council, and I made sure that all of those were sent in as part of this process, both in support of the Garden Bridge in a more general sense, or in response to the heads of terms, as well as those that were in objection to either the heads of terms or a wider range of problems that weren't necessarily the preserve of the decision and the heads of terms, but did relate to planning. I still considered those because I think it's important to understand that wider range of people.
Because the challenge is about, from the perspective of the community, of due process not being followed in arriving at the decision, which is what that is about. But from your perspective, you're saying that you believe that you've conducted yourself with integrity in making this decision.
Yeah, Councillor Craig.
It's just so that we get the record really accurate, because I think part of the scrutiny process is that when this is over, we feel proud and happy to justify the manner in which decisions were made. And so the record needs to show that it cannot be right that when major decisions like this are taken in an unprecedented manner, not least because of what's being discussed and the fact that the bridge is unique, but for Councillor Hopkins to say, I felt that I had some kind of almost mystical extrasensory perception to then allow me to understand the concerns of elected members is not acceptable. And the truth of it is, a meeting request was put in, nothing was received. Then a chase email was sent, and I'll happily release all that correspondence. But the point is, in the meantime, we saw you out campaigning for a great candidate for mayor, looking as healthy as you do tonight. And the risk is that we, irrespective of the substance, is this process and its very different nature, is it one that is we're proud of? Do we feel if it was our ward, when we've just been ignored, that that's good enough? And we don't. And that's a part of the overall complaint this evening that surely everyone can win from if we go back and look at this again.
I recognise everything that Councillor Craig said, and I don't agree with lots of what he said. I'm definitely not claiming to be mystical. I read through hundreds of representations. I read through them carefully. I feel like I understood them. It's not the first time that I've understood and listened to these concerns, either from councillors or from members of the public or organisations. That's what we do as councillors. Do I feel that I followed the correct process in line with the Constitution? Absolutely, yes I do. Do I feel hand on heart that I've understood and heard what the public, those both in favour of it or against it, have said? Yes I do, and I stand by that.
Councillor Chowdhury.
I just want to reiterate the question that Councillor Bigham asked, because I'm still not sure about the area in question. I just want to know how big the area is, and my concern, I suppose, is that the mention of the loss of green space, which is a premium in London anyway, especially that part of London.
That's a picture of the space that would be lost. It's not all of it. It's public space, pretty much, yeah. Public open space. That's what will be built on.
And the trees.
Yeah, the trees.
28 mature plane trees will go. That whole avenue will be absolutely decimated.
That sparkling blue lit boulevard will be gone.
Thank you.
Concrete with 7 trees.
Do you, obviously that's the perspective of some people.
That tree's not protected.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's quite concerning that the panel here doesn't actually know in detail the space that's going to
Never
be...
been there, Jackie.
I'm confused by that.
The outline of the building, I think, is about 415
what?
Square metres.
I think,
But I think the...
In fairness, the dimensions are in the papers.
Yeah.
So, you know, if people want to look at what 415 square metres,
but also the key point I think is that lots of these were tested, Councillor Chowdhury, at planning, where the planning committee have a responsibility to look at the loss of green open space and to weigh that up in the balance. And the committee, on a totally independent basis, as committee members, decided that actually there was a public interest benefit in the balance, and so that's where that decision sat, and informing my decision to allow officers to go and negotiate on these terms of lease. That agreement has already been made in that sense. So, I know it sounds very processy. In process terms, that is already council policy as agreed by the planning committee.
And it's not what we're being asked to look at here by the councillors that have called it in. Councillor Treypass, please.
I too live in a flat where I'm not fortunate enough to have access to a garden, so I do understand the sensitivity and the interest in maintaining the public open space, but just focusing on the sections here in the report about what the councillors would wish the overview and scrutiny committee to do. Could Councillor Hopkins talk a bit more? I mean, the main thing it says is that we should, refer it back and defer making this decision. As to why you think we shouldn't defer, or if there's any point hanging around a bit longer to see some more of this detail in 1, 2, and 3 come forwards.
I mean, I'll go back and at risk of sort of reiterating myself. The first point, the heads of terms are formally agreed by Common Street Community Builders can't actually happen unless this decision is made. Negotiation can go on, but actually they need to be formally agreed, and this decision allows that to happen. So I don't mean to dismiss it as a concern. The second, as we've heard, is that the guarantor issue will come up at planning. It's very firmly based legally within the Section 106 and planning, and within these heads of terms. There's a bit of chicken and egg, but I think there are two legal guarantees there that don't mean that this should be deferred, and actually it would be counterintuitive. The third, which is around kind of those 4 points. Again, we've gone through and addressed, I think, satisfactorily, and again, I recognise that people, councillor colleagues from bishops and members of the public who are here might not like those answers, but in terms of the processes that have been followed and that challenge about the heads of terms and the report that was submitted alongside those heads of terms, this is the report that accompanies my cabinet member decision, I don't think that they are justified for the reasons that we've talked about.
Councillor Mosley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of information, from my knowledge, and I've had conversations with Coin Street Community Builders about this, that they've already been in negotiations with you and with the officers. So if that's happening now, before this decision has been made, why on earth does this decision have to be made for them to continue? It doesn't make sense. Negotiations are already happening. The fact that Queen Street rejected these draft heads of terms are quite telling. I don't know what material changes will be. I don't know what they look like. They're not defined. But it sounds like there will be material changes to this draft heads of terms because they've already been rejected by Queen Street Community Builders. So why on earth does this decision have to be made? I'll just reiterate, sorry Jack, that we've already been negotiating from Lambeth's point of view and from your point of view with Coin Street, and I presume with the Garden Bridge Trust as well, about these heads of terms.
Okay, I mean, I said that absolutely agreed about 5 minutes ago. Yes, we've been in negotiation, and we can't formally agree the heads of terms that are laid out here until the decision to allow officers to finish those can be concluded. I haven't heard that Coin Street Community Builders have rejected these heads of terms. because we haven't actually gone out to offer them to them yet, because this is the decision. Now, negotiations, of course, go on to agree some common ground. What this heads of terms represents is the council's position. This is what we expect. We will expect no less, and if in formal negotiations that comes back, i.e. material changes, then we'll have to go through this again. But the expectations of the council are really clearly set out here formally for the first time, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to people from the committee?
Councillor Wilson. Oh, that was your point. Councillor Parr.
I mean, a lot of the details of calling and the discussion is about processes that have been followed, including the planning ones, which we're not looking at. And I'm sure that all the processes have been followed correctly. There's a paper in the report in the papers of an investigation that carried out by Democratic Services that has looked into that and confirmed that it all is correct. Having said that, are you really going to be happy that the Garden Bridge is built and the land is handed over for the South Landing Station without this ever having been discussed in principle by the council, by councillors?
Yeah.
Are you really happy that that is going to happen? Forget about the process. Would it not be better if we had gone through some political process that actually gave a decision in principle, which some people would like and some people wouldn't like, but we would have gone through the process of discussing that within the various groups, like Labour Group, obviously, is key.
I think that's the question that Alex Bingham was asking.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of your first question about calling, yes, I'm happy that we followed the correct processes. Councillors who may have felt particularly exercised by this, and the Bishop's councillors could have had debates at full council. There could have been other opportunities. They could have asked for that. That didn't happen, and so I feel confident that there's been a level of rigour and a level of scrutiny. I feel that there has been engagement with councillors through the planning committee process. I think that I've been lobbied by councillors. I've been lobbied through the Labour Party. I feel perfectly comfortable that the processes that have gone through will get the right outcome, and the interests of Lambeth as a borough have been protected both through the planning process and also this decision-making process in this heads of terms.
Sorry, can I just add something I forgot to add? You said that there was council policy in favour of this, the Garden Bridge, because it had gone through planning. That's not true, is it? The planning committee, the planning process is separate from council policy. Okay. So, notwithstanding the fact that there was a decision to support the application with a lot of conditions by planning application committee, that does not constitute council policy, does it? And so, sort of for the third time, I'm sorry, I don't like reiterating things, but would it not have been better if there had actually been a council policy decision?
I didn't feel a lot of pressure. I don't think there was a lot of pressure for that decision to be made.
Chair, just as a point of personal explanation, because Councillor Hopkins talks about we could have on specific decision, to challenge and debate in a comradely way why this lease now, why Councillor Hopkins with his portfolio, who or what are the investors that are driving this. We didn't have a fair opportunity to do that because in the time that intervened, we couldn't even get a response for a meeting. So that's not fair. And what we want to protect against is the unfair, which I still have to have faith in. We want to protect against the unfair charge that those with the power to do so wish to drive this through. And I think that this council, these members around here, all of whom have worked very hard to get to this point, all of us, including Councillor Hopkins, talk about respecting those who put us here. And we haven't had a chance to do that, Councillor, because we've outlined why.
There was a point earlier about why the decision was yours, Councillor Hopkins, to make, as opposed to the leader or the deputy leader for finance, given that someone alluded to the Constitution saying that it crossed various portfolios, and that would have been the normal or the proper way of proceeding. Could you just explain again why that wasn't followed and why it was your decision to make?
I think I've always been clear that this is sat within my portfolio. I think the report also follows that through, and I think Democratic Services have also been through that to confirm that that's right.
It doesn't. You agree?
Was that an answer?
You've got new portfolios. Jennifer is responsible.
Okay, sorry, I'm Jeremy. And the other point I wanted to ask is there's some question in the background papers about the proper nature of the officers being authorised to negotiate the variation of the lease as opposed to the politically responsible cabinet member. I mean, not being a technical expert myself, I'm assuming that they have technical expertise in order to negotiate the lease, but then that you're going to tell me, I hope, that you would have political oversight and that it's coming back to you. I believe it reflects that in the papers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, officers didn't draw these terms up in isolation. There's a proper political steer over these heads of terms. So, if I was going to be as practical as possible, my cabinet member political decision is to allow them to go away with this lease to negotiate with Collins Street Community Builders. Does that make sense?
Just a bit of clarification. In the papers it says the £250,000 contribution in terms of the maintenance. You said it would be £250,000. Actually says a maximum of £250,000. And then you use the example of the London Eye, where this is something that, I mean, it's probably a bit unfair to throw this at you, but if you happen to know, has the estimate for the maintenance of the works around the London Eye been about correct? I mean, would we expect a sort of 250k income, or does that change a lot with the London Eye being the example that you used?
Yes, sorry. Yes, the London Eye agreement, when it was first drafted, I think it was 1% of, I think it was the income or the visitor number. Sorry, I can't remember which one. 1%, which was about £300,000. That has increased year on year with visitor numbers, so it has increased over the period. The control or the influence over that money of how it's spent is dealt with by the visitor management group, which was set up specifically to address issues in the Waterloo area. So it has increased year on year with the increase in visitor numbers. In this particular instance, and Michael's quite right, thank you, it's turnover. We know exactly what that is because obviously turnover is measured by visitor ticket numbers. In relation to the Garden Bridge, because it's not ticketed, because it is open to the general public, we won't have that ticket information, so the approach to maintenance will evaluate it based on a baseline of what's happening now, what the increase in visitors is, and what the evidence is in terms of the impact of that, and that's how that will be dealt with. As we do in other areas of the council, where we have those calculations, we'll then work out what it costs. If it's less than £250,000, it will be based on evidence. If it's more, it will still be based on evidence, and we'll have a negotiation about the shortfall if there is any.
What are the benefits and the cost to Coin Street of the variation of the lease? The benefits and the cost.
I mean, I don't think I can actually speak on their behalf in terms of the benefits and the costs, because that's for them to evaluate as they are the leaseholder. In terms of what they currently enjoy, I think as explained before, in that open space they do have a number of temporary attractions and events that go on throughout the year. that bring income to Common Street community builders to use for the purposes that they use them for in terms of their articles and the activities that they take. Their current lease also includes some repairing requirements in relation to the river wall, which they also use that income for. So in essence, they will still have an income from the space. They are losing space in terms of what they can rent out, but it is being replaced by a permanent building, which they will then use for those purposes.
And there's still a bit of an uncomfortability, I think, that's on the panel, which is the sort of distinction between where policy is made in terms of like policy about such a decision as the Garden Bridge, because it seems to be the sense that it's actually being made around the planning committee in relation to the Garden Bridge in this instance, and that it hasn't been a policy decision that's been explored with politically with the Labour group. That doesn't seem to be the case. So I'm wondering what we can really learn from that in relation to such significant decisions that affect significant proportion of our community and our constituents, because it doesn't seem satisfactory in terms of the community and some of our political leaders that the way that this policy has been made has not been as inclusive as it could have been, and I would hope that we would be learning from that.
That's your pulse.
Okay. Does anyone else on the committee have any more questions? Councillor Bigham.
Just one final question, really, about the decision to list the open land as an asset of community value. What was the rationale behind doing that, and is there really any value in having assets of community value if you're able to bury leases and then subsequently build on?
As I indicated before, because Garden Bridge Trust is Common Street Community Builders is a community interest group, we could have disposed of it as well. The regulations permit that, but it is intended that where the irrelevant disposal does occur and it's not a community interest group that's taken that disposal, that the community will be given a 6-month moratorium to come up with a proposal to acquire the site, but there is no guarantee under that legislation that that community interest group can acquire the site. All it does is provide a moratorium period for a community interest group or whoever nominated as a community value to try and acquire the site.
And I think also in relation to the point about open space, I know we are separating out planning and property matters, but the planning committee and the process of determining the planning application, the conclusion from that process was that any open space that might be impacted upon would be mitigated by the replacement of the bridge as a garden. I realise people don't agree with that evaluation. That was reached through the planning committee. That was the position
Totally
they
privatising our
following the
gardens.
evaluation. And I realise people don't agree with that, but that is the committee.
Any other member of the committee have any other questions? I've now got to ask the 3 councillors who made the call-in to indicate if they consider the reasons for their call-in have been addressed, and if they haven't, perhaps they can just reiterate or sum up why that is the case and what course of action they wish the committee to take, albeit that I obviously do have what you've already asked in formal writing, and our options are limited by what you've got in front of us.
Well, I'll just say briefly, and then Ben and Jenny may want to add to that. That in essence, we've outlined in the paper that we think the cabinet member has not deliberately, actually, but not overseen a process that stands the test in terms of how decisions that this council makes, and especially this one in terms of the publication of this lease and what it proposes. We don't think that that has been undertaken as well as it could have been, and we request that it be referred back. We are very concerned that the way the process has taken place has not allowed proper discussion, challenge and scrutiny of some very big questions that remain outstanding in terms of, is it right that now in this way this cabinet member should take this decision with this level of council involvement, given the discussion, debate and opportunity to get involved in it that we feel. And we feel that the policies of the council are better met and more we feel that the council's policies will be met more accurately, both in terms of technical detail and spirit, if this decision is looked at again. Councillor colleagues?
Just simply to add to that, I think the point that Jack was making about whether or not the heads of terms could be formally agreed without this decision being made, I think we'd be happy if the committee members felt that point one needed to be varied, instead of it saying formally agreed, that it said agreed in principle or something. The point about that is that the negotiations with Coin Street have been happening and haven't concluded, and so before the decision is being made before those negotiations are concluded. So if there is an issue with that, we'd be happy for that to change.
To answer the question, we don't feel that our questions have been fully answered here this evening, unfortunately. And ultimately, we would like to request that the decision to give away our public space to private investors be referred back to the relevant cabinet member, because it's premature, not fully formed, and does not answer key considerations about whether this is beneficial for our community, for Coin Street, for Lambeth and for London.
There are 3 courses of action available to the committee. Number 1 is to resolve not to refer the decision back to the cabinet member. In other words, decide that there will be no further action is necessary, in which case the decision will be implemented. Or number 2, to resolve not to refer the decision back to the cabinet member, but nonetheless to make such recommendations to cabinet as it sees fit. In other words, the committee may wish to refer comments to the appropriate decision maker to consider, even if the committee decides not to accept the call-in. This will not prevent the decision from being implemented. Or number 3, to resolve the decision to the cabinet member for reconsideration with a written explanation setting out the nature of the committee's concerns. In other words, refer the matter back to the decision maker, clearly detailing concerns which are to be addressed, in which case the decision maker has 10 working days to amend, withdraw or implement the decision, and should formally notify the Overview and Scrutiny Committee accordingly. The Constitution also allows a 4th option, which is not on the table this evening, which is to refer to full council. That can only happen if the decision is contrary to the budget and policy framework, and our legal people tell us that isn't the case, and therefore it isn't an option. So it's only 1, 2 or 3. And as I said at the beginning, I've tried to stick to, we're not deciding whether the garden bridge is a good idea, any of those things, or anything that's been decided by the planning committee. It's strictly on the 3 issues that were raised in the papers. So number 1, just to remind ourselves, the heads of terms are formally agreed by Coin Street Community Builders. Number 2, it is formally confirmed that GLA will act as a guarantor for the garden bridge, section 106, and associated maintenance. Number 3 is a revised report to support the decision to be resubmitted, which addresses or remediates a significant number of misrepresentations and errors in the current report, which is set out on the previous 2 pages, the errors that councillors believe have been made. I'm going to go down the line, starting with Councillor Bigham. If each member of the committee could indicate whether they are opting for option 1, to resolve not to refer back to the cabinet member, option 2, to refer back to the decision maker, to not refer back to the decision maker, sorry, but make recommendations, or number 3, to refer back to the decision maker. If it's 2 or 3, could you briefly outline what those recommendations would be as far as you are concerned? And then it will come to me last, and I will have to make a judgment. Hopefully the numbers will be clear, but they might not be, and sum up. And if anyone disagrees with me, we can have a discussion about it. I'll start with, the committee, that is, I'm sure. Someone's not going to agree with me. That's certain. I'll start with Councillor Bigham, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to choose option 3 to resolve to refer it back to the cabinet member, particularly in relation to the concerns that have been raised around the absence of effective scrutiny. I feel particularly as a backbench member that when we do make controversial decisions as a council, which we have on a number of occasions, especially in recent months, there needs to be effective engagement of the whole of the cabinet, ideally full council, and in particular those backbench councillors who are affected by the decision who represent their residents. And I feel that process has not been followed adequately. I think there also needs to be additional consideration of if there is a final negotiation on the heads of terms, how those final conditions are then presented back to full council and considered for full scrutiny process.
Councillor Parr.
I'd also go for option 3 to refer the decision back. Not really driven by any of the 3 specific reasons given in the call-in, I'm afraid, but I'd like the report to come back with a commitment to bring back the draft deed of variation, or whatever is the correct term, the document ready to be signed, as a further separate decision subject to scrutiny. Secondly, I'd like to add a recommendation to the cabinet member that a separate decision is put in front of at least cabinet and preferably full council, a decision in principle to support the development of the Garden Bridge, and I think that decision should occur after due discussion amongst all interested councillors, and that should happen before the decision to agree the actual deed of variation. I hope that makes sense, and I'll say some of it again if necessary.
Councillor Wilson.
Firstly, I'm going for option 2, and the reason being is that I feel this was slightly preemptive. I think that what the councils have done is raise the issue around policy development and how we're taking the decision, and I think that is a separate debate that we should have. Serious reservations about this as a policy decision, but looking at the 3 criteria in which you've brought this here today, I think I'm satisfied that actually taking the decision releases the heads of terms into the public domain. That is in the interest of people and in the interest of the community to see that. That's fine. Guarantor is handled by the planning process, and I can't, between the misrepresentations and errors, I think there's 1.5 on either side, and I'm minded to think that actually that isn't the real reason this is here. But in terms of saying comments back, this has to be a decision that's taken in public in the future. This can't be a decision about the policy that is taken by one cabinet member. This needs to be taken by the council, and it needs to be a political decision about what our stance is on the Garden Bridge. And secondly, again, coming back to material changes, I would suggest that any variations to the heads of terms, and Councillor Mosley is correct, the Forestry Builders have completely rejected it, then this will probably be some very long process, but we understand every single variation that is done to those heads of terms.
Thank you. Councillor Dyer.
It's a difficult one, but I am sort of bounded by what it was the request that the committee was asked to do. And based on that, I think that I'm going to go for option 2, but nevertheless some recommendations about the process going forward, which I think must be a real commitment to engage collaboratively with the councillors and the community in every step of the process going forward, and I think that that's the responsibility of the cabinet member going forward to do that, and if that's not taking place, then that's a real area of significant concern. But I want to be able to apply the confidence that you're able to, the cabinet member and the council officers are able to do that. And there is an issue which is a separate issue, I think, that has been said here, which is about policy development that has to be learned from this experience going forward. So that's the additional recommendation, that we cannot have policy decisions seemingly being made in isolation via a planning committee without significant dialogue with the community and councillors representing the community.
Thank you. Councillor Chowdhury, please.
Again, similar to Councillor Dyer, I'm torn between option 2 and option 3, but I'm going to go with 3. The reason is because I feel I'm not completely satisfied that all the voices have been heard, and I don't feel comfortable in sort of not sending it back to the cabinet member for reconsideration, because I do think that I heard some valid concerns today, and while all of them may not be directly related to the 3 issues on the discussion, they're still quite significant in my mind, so that's why I'm cutting for 3.
It's all right with you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to just give my reasons, and then I'm going to give the what I've decided. It's more interesting. The first thing is I don't have a problem with the heads of terms. I don't have a problem with the guarantor. The issue that I have, and I think it's fundamental, and colleagues have touched on it, is this idea that is the transparency of the process, effectively. And you could call that a political decision, and that's decided politically by the Labour Group or decided in council, and the process of doing that being important. But for me, it touches on the whole point about what we do and why we're here is to represent people. And even if we have to make difficult decisions or decisions that people don't like, people should have their say. And it seems to me, when Councillor Parr said, look, wasn't it better to have gone through the process of discussion, even if in going through, it's the same with this, the European referendum. Whatever's decided on the European referendum, we will have gone through the process of discussion, and at the end of it, everyone will come together and go, right, well, that's the decision. And it's exactly the same with this. And I don't feel that the process of discussion has been properly gone through. I hear what Councillor Hopkins says about the missed meeting request that he was ill, but really, you could have just met the councillor. And with regards to what Councillor Dyer says when she says policy decisions weren't explored, clearly that appears to be the case. There have been a lot of decisions made, a lot of call-ins we've had. Loughborough Junction, Preston Gardens, libraries and so on, where my point has pretty much always been the same, that if we are open and transparent about how these decisions are made, and we have a more effective way of engaging with people, then half of these issues wouldn't be issues at all. So I'm going to choose number 3 on the basis that fundamental to this process is the fact that it doesn't appear from the papers that I've read, from the responses that have been given, for all the very decent responses that have been made by Councillor Hopkins, it doesn't appear that that process has been properly followed.
Councillor Trespass.
I'm going to go with option 2 for the same reason set out by Councillor Wilson, that we're focusing on the points 1 to 3 in the scrutiny report, and with the same recommendations really as Councillor Wilson mentioned. I suppose there's been a slight uncomfortableness around making political discussion when there's a planning application and a planning decision to be made, or when to have those debates amongst councillors before or after planning application decisions are made. And I do support the comments about needing to engage with the ward councillors on this matter. I'm going for option 2.
Thank you. Councillor Adelaide Paul.
Yes, similarly, based on the criteria we've been asked to look at this evening, I'm going to go for option 2, and I'm going to explain my reasons for doing so on each of the points we've been asked to look at. In terms of point 2 on the guarantor, I'm satisfied that issue's been dealt with, because it's been made clear that that's a planning criteria, and if that isn't put in place, then it won't be met planning criteria and it won't go ahead, so I'm satisfied that's been dealt with. In terms of point 3, I agree there are legitimate concerns about the democratic accountability and policy issues around this. I can see there's been a lot of concerns tonight, and I sympathise with a lot of them, so I'd like to endorse Councillor Wilson's recommendations that we'd add along those terms as well. In terms of point 1 on the heads of terms, again, I think there are some legitimate concerns about what would constitute a material change, and those questions haven't been fully answered, I don't think, tonight. So I'd like to add a recommendation on that further clarity could be provided on that, because I think it is one of the big issues people have with the heads of terms. They don't really understand what it means that there'd be a material change. That's it. The recommendation would have some further clarity and further transparency on that going forward would be really useful to us. But yeah, as I say, on the points we've had tonight, I'm satisfied that the process has been followed correctly, so option 2 is my choice.
Thanks very much. Well, I make that 4-all. I don't know if that's a score in the Arsenal game. However, that does mean that I have not been able to get out of getting everyone else to make a decision for me. It is very difficult, and I sympathise with all the points that have been made regarding the process in terms of deciding policy. But as has been mentioned several times, I'm bound by what I've been asked to look at by the 3 councillors who have called it in. And number 1, the heads of terms are formally agreed by Coin Street Community Builders. I'm satisfied that the process needs to be able to move forward in order for Coin Street to be able to agree in the first place. So I'm not convinced that is an issue that we can ask Councillor Hopkins to reconsider on. Number 2, I'm convinced that the planning conditions mean that either the GLA will act as a guarantor for the bridge, or it won't be built. And I think that's just the nature of the legal agreement. I'm not an expert in planning, but that's what the lawyer says. That's all I can go on. So I can't send that back either. And on number 3, I think the issues that have been raised, whilst significant and well worth exploring, and I do endorse what's been said by nearly every colleague as regards to the process of deciding policy in an open way. I don't think that constitutionally anything has been done incorrectly or wrongly, even if in the spirit of making open decisions. I personally think it would have been better to have had a discussion in a group, to have a decision in full council. It's not like we don't make those kinds of difficult decisions all the time. We have done on Cressingham Gardens, libraries, to name two recent examples, which weren't easy. So I'm not quite sure why that wasn't the case with this particular example. And I do think that's not what I've been asked to do in terms of what's being asked of the committee here. And I do think it's unfortunate that for whatever reason, the cabinet members and local councillors and other representatives haven't managed to meet and discuss things as fully as they possibly could do. So in terms of recommendations, obviously a written record will be made of it, but we would like to see a commitment going forward to engaging more fully with the local councillors and local community in particular, and I think more broadly we need to have a fuller understanding and confidence in a political process that allows all councillors more input and more members of the community more input into decisions of this kind.
We don't have any confidence.
But in terms of what I've been asked to look at and the committee's been asked to look at on these things, I have to go with what I believe to be the correct course of action, which is option number 2. So obviously the written recommendations will be sent and will be a public record along with the minutes of the meeting, and the cabinet member will respond in due course. I want to thank the ward councillors in particular. It's not easy bringing a call in, I know, because I've done one myself to my own committee, especially when it's an administration of party colleagues. That's always really difficult, but I think you've done an excellent job in representing certainly a significant number of your constituents, and I also want to thank the committee, because that's a really difficult set of issues that we had to disaggregate the controversy around the Garden Bridge from what we've actually been asked to look at, and I think we've tried to do that as best to our ability, but recognising that people aren't always going to be, not everybody's going to be happy with that decision. But thank you very much for coming out, and for the people that made their representations this evening. I do appreciate that.
It's a waste of time.
Thank you very much.
It's just you want the bridge to happen, that's why those people over there want it.
I'll leave this one here for you. It's today's article, and it's the timeline, so there's no transparency. Anybody involved come up and take one.
Corruption! You should all be ashamed!